Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome to our witnesses today. When Congress created the universal student loan programs, it didn't call them student grant programs. In fact, there are separate grant programs like Pell for low-income students. But Congress created the student loan program with the same expectation as any other loan program, that the loans would be paid back. Now, some of my Democratic colleagues clearly want the president, despite his lacking the legal authority, to cancel many of these outstanding loans, effectively converting them into grants of potentially tens of thousands of dollars per borrower. So let's be clear about what canceling student loan debt means. It's a massive wealth transfer from taxpayers to a small subset of mostly wealthy individuals. First of all, fewer than 1 in 5 American adults even have federal student loan debt. That means that 210 million American adults have no federal loan debt. So why do 80% of American adults have no student loan debt? Well, many of them never went to college. Or they went to college, but they didn't take out student loans. They just paid as they progressed. Or they took out student loans to pay for college, and they paid them back. Second, individuals with a bachelor's degree or higher overwhelmingly make more money than people who don't have those degrees. The vast majority of them are perfectly able to repay their loans. They have significantly lower unemployment rates, and on average, they earn $1 million more over their lifetime than non-college graduates. Third, student loan debt is primarily owed by wealthy families and graduate students. Even the Washington Post's left-leaning editorial board has blasted the president's plan as a transfer to the wealthy. They wrote, and I quote, "A broad cancellation would offer huge, undeserved benefits," end quote, to individuals in high-paying fields. And they correctly pointed out that, quote, "the vast number of American taxpayers lacking university degrees would subsidize well-heeled white-collar professionals," end quote. Now, all student debt is obviously voluntarily incurred. Over half of all student debt is taken by graduate students, many of whom happily incur the debt because they're entering high-paying fields like business and medicine and law. Of course, some graduate students have degrees that are not highly valued by the labor market. As the Wall Street Journal wrote, and I quote, "Doctorate recipients in the humanities in 2019 earned $53,000 on average. Machinists make more," end quote. But this begs the question, why should a machinist ever have to pay off the loans of an art history PhD, let alone a medical doctor? Beyond being a massive wealth transfer to the well-off and well-credentialed, student debt cancellation is grossly unfair to every other American. Frankly, it's a slap in the face to the machinist, to the taxpayer, to anyone who didn't go to college, and to anyone who works for a living making financial sacrifices so they can pay their own or their kids' college bills that they saved instead of going on vacation or splurging on gadgets. Those people don't have student loans, but they've got other debt. Should the government cancel their mortgages, their car loans, their credit card bills? Of course not. It's almost never acceptable for the taxpayers to be forced to be responsible for someone else's voluntarily incurred private debt. Cancellation of student debt obscures the root cause of the problem here, and the root cause of this problem is the outrageously high cost of higher education. For decades, the government showered students with cheap debt and grants to go to college. With government paying so much of the cost, students were largely indifferent to the price. Understanding that price didn't matter to their customers, colleges responded by raising tuition. According to a study by the New York Fed economists, anytime there's an increase in the amount that a student can take out for a federal subsidized loan, 60% of that increase is passed through as a tuition hike. The solution is obvious here: less government subsidization and more personal responsibility. But it seems some have forgotten these immutable economic truths. Colleges have little incentive to keep prices reasonable if they believe government will cancel the debt used to pay for the tuition. They've already demonstrated that they are willing to raise prices at multiples of the rate of inflation because they can. If government starts canceling everyone's debt, then we can expect another surge of higher education inflation. With the government expected to issue roughly $1 trillion in new student loan debt over the next decade, we'll soon be right back in the same position. Let me conclude by dispelling an argument that you may hear today that student debt cancellation will somehow ease inflation. The opposite is clearly true. Through May 1st of this year, the Nonpartisan Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, or CRFB, estimated that the COVID student loan repayment pause has already effectively canceled $5,500 per borrower on average, and thereby pumped roughly $5 billion of excess stimulus into the economy each month with no corresponding increase in the supply of goods and services. The CRFB estimates that full debt cancellation could raise inflation from the already outrageously high levels by between 1/3 and 1/2 an additional percentage point. So in addition to being egregiously unfair and bad policy, Americans simply can't afford it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.